Hey guys, and welcome to the March 2016 edition of Commander on a Budget, a monthly series I do here on my channel where I showcase a commander deck that I've built and a few games with it, and these decks all cost under $50 on Magic Online, and they're usually pretty budget in paper Magic as well. This particular deck costs $49 on Magic Online, 49 tickets basically, and in the description of this video there should be a link to the tappedout.net deck list, which will also tell you how much this would cost in paper. So this month's deck was determined by a Twitter poll on my Twitter. I had a choice between two different decks. One was Reiki, the History of Kamigawa, and the other one was Alesha, Who Smiles at Death, and Alesha won by a lot. If you're interested in being able to sort of control what kind of content I produce, following me on Twitter is a pretty good idea, and you can do that at @Nietzahone_magic. Link also in the description. So we are doing Alesha. Before we get into talking about it, I also wanted to say you should check out paperchampion.net for awesome Magic the Gathering content, and my videos are posted there as well. Anyway, so yes, our deck this month is Alesha. She basically aims to reanimate. She's like a reanimator strategy, but only with small creatures. And she's a 3-mana 3/2 with first strike, which is pretty good. When she attacks, you can pay either black or white, either double black, hybrid black or white, I guess is the easiest way of saying it. And if you do, you get to return a creature with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, attacking and tapped. So what this deck tries to do is sort of make the graveyard into a toolbox. It runs a lot of toolbox creatures. It also runs creatures that can just win the game when you bring them back. So we will get into talking about that. Part of the reason this deck is sort of expensive is basically the mana base. When you're running a 3-color commander deck, you end up having to have like blood crypts and things like that to feel safe. Are there any other lands I want to talk about specifically? Crypt of Agadim is really good in this deck at times because we get so many cards in our graveyard, and we can combine it with an X spell like Profane Command, but we'll get there. I don't think there's any other like super interesting lands, but they mostly produce at least 2 colors, and that's important for a 3-color deck when the commander really needs all 3 colors. So I have things divided into piles the way I usually do. This first pile is basically ways of throwing stuff in my graveyard. And we'll talk about that one first. We have Wheel of Fate, which has the Wheel of Fortune effect, except it's suspended. These sorts of effects are really strong in this deck because we mostly want to discard all the creatures in our hand so we can get them back with Alesha, and we don't really suffer from having to discard our hand the way our opponent probably will, because they have to discard their hand as well, and we get to draw 7 new cards in our graveyard. The things in our graveyard just become part of our toolbox. Faithless Looting, pretty classic. Draw 2, discard 2 that you can do twice. Tormenting Voice. Dangerous Wager, pretty good card for this deck. Wheel of Fortune, the original Wheel of Fortune effect. Shattered Perception has the effect, except it only affects me. Magus of the Wheel does the Wheel of Fortune thing, in addition to being a 3-mana 3/3. Dark Deal is really good because I can use it also to disrupt my opponent's plans, and make them lose 1 card at the same time while again stocking my graveyard. Buried Alive is the card that I want to draw the most frequently because I can basically always find 3 creatures to throw in my graveyard that'll win me the game pretty quickly if Alesha's not dealt with. Reforge the Soul, Wheel of Fortune effect except with Miracle. Incendiary Command is nice because it has the Wheel of Fortune effect, but it can also do other things like kill a bunch of small creatures, burn my opponent, or blow up in a land. Shaundra Blaze, one of the few decks Shaundra Blaze is actually worth putting in, is this one. I can both discard cards to do 4 damage if it's a red card, or make me and my opponent both discard their whole hand and draw 3 cards. The -7 basically never happens. Wake the Dead is really strong in this deck. It lets me return as many creatures as I want from my graveyard, assuming I can pay the mana. And most of the creatures in this deck have entered the battlefield effect, so that's what makes it so good. It's also just good defensively. Dread Summons, another great card for the deck. Me and my opponent both have to mill ourselves, but in my case, I'm getting stuff in my graveyard that I can reanimate, and I also get zombies for every creature that gets put in that way. And then I have Balustrade Spy, who's nice because he mills me, but I can also get it back with Alesha in an event where I just don't have what I want in my graveyard, and he can mill me some more, while also having evasion. All right, so here we just sort of have staples. I'll talk about them real quickly. Path to Exile, pretty much always want that. Vampiric Tutor, pretty much always want that in a black deck. Mardu Charm, pretty much want it in any Mardu deck because of its flexibility. Mana Vault, Mana Rock usually want. Wretched Confluence, one of the better of the Confluences, and it's very good in this deck. It can bring cards back from my graveyard, which I want to do sometimes, and it can also kill stuff or help me draw cards. Comet Storm, pretty big staple for red. We have Skull Clamp, which is basically a staple in all commander decks, but really good in this one because my creatures die regularly anyway. Soul Ring, pretty typical. Cold Steel Heart is nice because it can produce colored mana, and it's a turn 2 drop. I have it in here instead of Felwar Stone because colored mana is pretty important in this deck because of Alesha's ability. Dark Steel Ingot can produce any color. Commander Sphere produces any color in my commander's colors, while also being able to draw me a card. Chromatic Lantern makes all my lands add any color I want, and it adds any color I want. Chaos Warp, good red staple, should put it in basically every red commander deck. Banishing Light, similar for white. Diabolic Tutor to have another tutor effect, and then we have the 2 commands. Austere Command is a great staple for white that can do a lot of things. A lot of the times I can make it a one-sided wrath because I can just kill my opponent's 4 graders. And Profane Command is good because it gets me something back from my graveyard if I wanted to, or it can just drain my opponent and kill something, which is pretty great. And so here we're looking at, in this third pile with 26 cards, the sort of various cards I can bring back with Alesha, and we'll talk about the various benefits they bring. Leonin Relic Warder, is in there as a removal spell for artifacts or enchantments, but I can also, when I really need to remove an artifact or enchantment and my graveyard has this in it, I can bring the Leonin Relic Warder in. Mog War Marshal, creatures with Echo in general are really good in this deck. We have a couple of them. This one's great because he keeps dying and I can just keep bringing him back and making goblins, either to stall or help me swing for more damage. Sting Scourger is great too since it bounces stuff. And also, I just don't pay the Echo cost and I can get it back every turn. Timoret's nice, both because he can bring himself back from the graveyard on his own. I can bring him back with Alesha should I decide I want to do that. And he gives me a sacrifice outlet, which is good if I want to get more enter the battlefield triggers. Cathari Bomber is another creature that sacrifices itself when I bring it back, but in doing so it brings goblin tokens. Garza's Assassin is really strong because I can use it to kill creatures. Just bring back Alesha, bring it back with Alesha and kill something with it, assuming it's not black. Drawn is really great just because it starts pumping the whole team, and as you've seen, there's already a fair amount of token generation. Big Game Hunter is nice because it has Madness, so sometimes when I discard it, I can use it anyway, and other times I can just bring it out of the graveyard to kill stuff. Same thing with Fiend Hunter, can kill stuff from the graveyard or my hand, and Banisher Priest. Mentor of the Meek is good because, as you would guess, most of the creatures in this deck have 2 or less power, and I can pay 1 anytime they enter the battlefield to draw more cards. Solemn Simulacrum helps me get the colors I need and draw cards. Blazing Spectre is nice if my opponent has stuff in his hand that I'm worried about. I can start disrupting it. Necrotal is another creature that can just come back and kill stuff. Grenzo's great because almost all the creatures in this deck have 2 or less power. So if I'm using his put the bottom card effect, put stuff in my graveyard, they're basically going to come into play most of the time. There are chances they don't, but not a lot of them. Mortivore, so creatures that have star power and star toughness, I guess toughness doesn't matter, but the star power is what matters here, count as 2 or less. So if my graveyard or my opponent's graveyard each have 10 creatures in it, I can bring back Mortivore for 2 mana and have a 20/20 that can regenerate, so that's pretty good. Blinding Angel can be used if my opponent is about to destroy me with his creatures, and I can just keep making them skip their attack phase, assuming they don't have a flying blocker. Duplicant, another removal spell, although probably the best of the bunch because it exiles things and becomes that size. Minion of the Wastes is at times an instant win combo, has Trample, and on top of that, it's another star creature, so I can bring it back. If I have a decent amount of life, I can just pay like 30, and he's a 30/30 Trampler. Like if my opponent's tapped out and not paying attention to my graveyard, or I discard it in that turn and they don't know it's coming, that can often just win the game. Sewer Nemesis, another star. I'll usually choose myself with this because I'm milling myself a lot, although I do have lots of Wheel of Fortune effects, so sometimes my opponent's fine to choose too. But he also starts milling me and getting more options in my graveyard. Point is, though, he'll be huge and count as having two or less power. Disciple of Bolas can be used if I either really need life or I really want to draw cards, or both. Resolute Blade Master can be used sort of to just finish the game by giving everything double strike. Siege Gang Commander, another creature who helps make goblins. He can also sacrifice himself with his effect, so I can keep getting him back if I have that much mana. Mindclaw Shaman can be used to steal a great card from my opponent's hand. Geist Honored Monk, it can just be huge, another star creature. But in addition to that, every time he comes into play, he gives me 2 spirit creatures. And Karmic Guide's great because I can bring it back and then use Karmic Guide's ability to bring something else back. And not pay Echo. And then get it back every turn, which is pretty disgusting. So I also have 3 cards here that help me get things back from my graveyard in addition to Alesha. And then they're all pretty great. One of them is Footsteps of the Goryo, which I can use if I really need an enter the battlefield trigger or want 2 in a turn because Alesha can only get 1. Revelark, which can get back most creatures from my graveyard because it has the same power 2 or less clause. In addition to being a decent 4/3 flying body. And Sun Titan, who's probably the most ridiculous of all of them because he does it when he comes into play, and it's actually any permanent. I'm usually going to pick a creature, and then every time he attacks, he does the same thing. So that is the Alesha Who Smiles at Death budget commander deck. I will now play 3 games with it. I hope you watch those. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.